You check your bank account and feel that familiar knot in your stomach. Not because you're broke, but because deep down you know you're making the same financial mistakes over and over again. You earn decent money, maybe even good money, yet somehow wealth feels as distant as it did 5 years ago. You've bought the courses, followed the gurus, chased the hot stocks, and still, you're running in place while watching others build generational fortunes with what seems like effortless precision. Here's what haunts you most. You suspect there's a fundamental difference between how you think about money and how the truly wealthy operate. You're right. And today, I'm going to show you exactly what that difference is. I am Solomon, the richest man who ever lived, and I didn't accumulate wealth by accident or luck. I built it through 7 absolute principles, 7 lines I would never cross with my money. These aren't tips or hacks. They are the invisible barriers that separate those who build lasting wealth from those who forever chase it. Most people violate these principles daily without even knowing it. They think they're being smart, strategic, even bold, but they're actually guaranteeing their financial mediocrity. They're choosing the path that feels right in the moment but leads nowhere in the long run. What you're about to discover will fundamentally change how you see every financial decision for the rest of your life. This isn't about getting rich quick. This is about thinking like wealth itself, about becoming the type of person who attracts and keeps money naturally, almost inevitably. The 7 mistakes I'm about to reveal are so common that you've probably made at least 3 of them in the past month. But once you understand why I would never make these moves, and more importantly, what I do instead, you'll start recognizing opportunities and avoiding traps that are completely invisible to almost everyone around you. This is your moment to stop thinking like someone who wants money and start thinking like someone who commands it. If you're ready to make that transformation, if you're tired of financial mediocrity disguised as progress, then you need to subscribe right now and commit to watching this entire video. Because what I'm about to share with you is the difference between spending your life earning money and spending your life building wealth. Number 1, never trade principles for profit. Look around you right now and count how many people you know who have compromised their values for money. Maybe you see it in the mirror. That gnawing feeling when you took a deal that felt wrong, accepted money from sources you questioned, or stayed silent when you should have spoken truth. You told yourself it was just business, just this once, just to get ahead. But deep in your chest, you carry the weight of that choice like a stone you cannot remove. Here is the fundamental truth that separates those who build lasting wealth from those who merely accumulate temporary riches. The source of your money determines the quality of your life. I learned this not through philosophy, but through observing the rise and fall of kingdoms, the joy and misery of countless souls who came before my throne seeking wisdom they had traded away for gold. When you accept money that contradicts your deepest values, you are not just making a transaction. You are selling pieces of your soul on an installment plan. Each compromise creates a crack in your character, and eventually, those cracks become the fault lines along which your entire life will shatter. The wealthy understand this. The truly wealthy never forget it. Picture a well of the purest water. Every day, you must choose what to pour into it. Clean, life-giving streams or polluted runoff that promises to fill it faster. The desperate pour in anything, thinking volume matters most. But the wise know that one drop of poison ruins the entire well, and once contaminated, it takes generations to purify again. Your wealth is that well. Your principles determine what flows into it. I remember a merchant who came to me with tears in his eyes. He had built an empire through partnerships with corrupt officials, charging interest that crushed families, and selling products he knew were harmful. His coffers overflowed, but his children would not speak to him. His sleep was haunted by the faces of those he had destroyed. And every relationship in his life was transactional, because people sensed the darkness at his core. He begged me for wisdom to undo what he had done. I told him the truth that shattered him. You cannot build heaven with the tools of hell. The world will tell you that principles are luxuries only the already wealthy can afford. This is the greatest lie ever told about money. Principles are not the reward of wealth. They are the foundation upon which all lasting wealth is built. When you trade your values for profit, you are trading your power for temporary advantage. You become dependent on systems and people you despise, vulnerable to blackmail and exposure, constantly looking over your shoulder instead of confidently forward. Every dollar you earn through compromise whispers to you in the dark hours. It reminds you that you are not the person you pretend to be. It erodes your confidence, corrupts your judgment, and eventually makes you incapable of recognizing real opportunities because you have trained yourself to see everything through the lens of moral shortcuts. But when your wealth flows from sources that align with your deepest values, something miraculous happens. You sleep peacefully. You make decisions from strength, not desperation. People trust you instinctively because they sense your integrity. Your money multiplies not just through compound interest, but through the compound respect and opportunities that come to those who are known for their character. The practical application is both simple and revolutionary. Before accepting any money, any partnership, any opportunity, ask yourself this question: if my children knew exactly how I earned this, would they be proud to call me their parent? If the answer creates even a moment of hesitation, walk away. No amount of profit is worth the cost of your self-respect. I learned to treat my principles as my most valuable asset, more precious than gold or silver. They were the filter through which every opportunity had to pass. This did not make me poorer. It made me exponentially wealthier, because people knew that my word was my bond, that my commitments were unbreakable, that associating with me elevated rather than compromised their own reputation. The turning point in understanding wealth comes when you realize that money is not neutral. It carries the energy and intention of how it was earned. Money earned through deception carries deception in its essence and will multiply deception in your life. Money earned through service and value creation multiplies service and value in return. This is not mysticism. This is the deepest practical wisdom about how wealth actually works in the real world. When you commit to earning money only through means that honor your highest self, you tap into a power that the morally flexible will never access. You become magnetic to opportunities, partners, and resources because the universe itself conspires to support those who refuse to compromise their core values. Your wealth becomes a force for good, not just in your life, but in every life it touches. The choice is before you now. You can continue accepting money from any source, climbing a ladder that leads nowhere worth going, accumulating wealth that ultimately impoverishes your spirit. Or you can commit to the harder, slower, infinitely more rewarding path of building wealth that builds you in return. Remember this: the quality of your money determines the quality of your life, and there is no amount of profit worth the price of your soul. Number 2, never seek quick gains without understanding risk. You feel it, don't you? That electric thrill when someone shows you an opportunity that promises to double your money in months, maybe weeks. Your heart races, your palms sweat, and suddenly every other investment seems foolishly slow and conservative. You imagine telling everyone how you spotted the opportunity they missed, how you had the courage to act while others hesitated. But underneath that excitement lurks a fear you rarely acknowledge, the terrifying possibility that you have no idea what you are really risking. This is the siren song that has destroyed more wealth than every war and natural disaster combined. The promise of quick gains without the patience to understand true risk. I have watched kingdoms fall because rulers chased the mirage of effortless riches. I have seen merchants lose generations of family wealth in pursuit of returns that seemed too good to pass up and were. The fundamental law of wealth is this: every reward is connected to a corresponding risk, and when someone promises you extraordinary returns with minimal risk, you are not looking at an opportunity. You are looking at a disaster disguised as a gift, the desperate mistake velocity for intelligence and confused gambling for investing. But the wise know that speed is the enemy of wealth, and patience is its closest friend. Think of a master craftsman shaping precious metal. Each hammer strike is deliberate, measured, purposeful. He studies the grain of the material, feels its resistance, understands its limits. The amateur swings wildly, impatient for results, and destroys in minutes what took years to create. Your wealth is that precious metal. Every financial decision is a hammer blow that either shapes it into something beautiful or shatters it beyond repair. A young nobleman once came to me with news of a trading expedition that promised to triple his inheritance within a year. He had already gathered his gold and was prepared to risk everything on this single venture. The expedition leader painted visions of exotic lands where common goods sold for extraordinary prices. I asked the young man 3 simple questions. What exactly are you buying? What could prevent you from selling it? And what happens if you are wrong? He could answer none of them, yet he was ready to bet his future on his ignorance. I sent trusted advisors to investigate this expedition. What they discovered would have horrified him if he had bothered to look. The route passed through territories at war. The goods were already flooding those markets through other channels, and the expedition leader had a history of taking investors' money and disappearing. The young man was not investing. He was donating his inheritance to strangers who were better at telling stories than creating value. The shift in thinking that changes everything is this: speed is not a feature of good investments. It is usually a warning sign. When someone needs your decision immediately, when they cannot give you time to analyze and think, when they pressure you with scarcity and urgency, they are revealing that their opportunity cannot withstand scrutiny. Real wealth is built by people who think in decades, not days. Before risking any significant amount of money, I demanded to understand 5 essential elements: the true value of what I was acquiring, the sustainability of the cash flow it would generate, the broader market forces that could affect its value, the margin of safety between what I paid and what it was worth, and most critically, what could go wrong and how devastating that would be. This process was not exciting. It was often boring, methodical, painstaking. While others chased the latest trend, I was reading contracts, analyzing fundamentals, seeking the opinion of people who had no financial interest in my decision. I learned that the most profitable investments are often the most boring ones, and the most exciting opportunities are often the most dangerous. The practical wisdom is this: make slowness your competitive advantage. While others rush toward what appears to be easy money, you take the time to understand what you are truly buying and what you are genuinely risking. You demand proof, not promises. You seek substance, not stories. You invest in assets you can explain to a child and hold for a decade without losing sleep. I discovered that the best opportunities often come disguised as problems that patient, careful analysis can solve. While speculators chase headlines and trends, real wealth is built by finding undervalued assets that generate predictable returns over time. This requires the courage to be bored when everyone else is excited, and the wisdom to act when everyone else is paralyzed by fear. The asymmetry I always sought was not the promise of unlimited upside, but the certainty of limited downside combined with reasonable upside potential. I preferred to make good returns with high certainty rather than chase exceptional returns with high uncertainty. This approach seemed conservative to the gamblers around me, but over time, it compounded into extraordinary wealth, while their spectacular bets compounded into spectacular losses. Remember that markets reward patience and punish haste. The money you lose chasing quick gains is not just money lost. It is also the compound interest that money would have earned over decades of patient growth. Every dollar lost to impatience costs you many future dollars in wealth. Every dollar invested wisely today becomes many future dollars in security and freedom. When you feel the intoxication of a too-good-to-be-true opportunity, pause, breathe, ask the hard questions, demand the boring details. Take the time to understand not just what you could gain, but what you could lose, and how that loss would affect not just your bank account, but your life, your family, your peace of mind. The opportunities that cannot survive this scrutiny are exactly the ones you must avoid, and the ones that emerge stronger from your analysis are exactly the ones worthy of your precious capital. Number 3, never spend before investing. You know that moment at the end of the month when you look at what is left in your account and think about investing, only to realize there is barely enough to cover your immediate desires? You promise yourself that next month will be different, that you will invest first and spend second, but somehow the same pattern repeats. Your lifestyle expands to consume every dollar you earn, leaving scraps for the future and nothing for the wealth building that you know you should be doing. This is the silent tragedy playing out in millions of lives. Good people with good intentions who have inverted the most fundamental principle of wealth building. They pay everyone else first and themselves last. They fund their present at the expense of their future, then wonder why their future never arrives. They are generous with merchants and miserly with their own destiny. The inversion that changed my life and can change yours is this: you must pay your future self before you pay anyone else. Not because you are selfish, but because you are wise. Not because you do not deserve good things now, but because you deserve great things later. The person who pays themselves first is not taking from the present. They are borrowing from a future abundance that they are actively creating. Imagine two farmers with identical plots of land and identical harvests. The first farmer consumes his entire harvest, enjoying rich meals and celebrating his good fortune. The second farmer sets aside the best portion of his harvest as seed for the next season and lives on what remains. The first farmer has a better year. The second farmer has a better life. The first farmer experiences temporary abundance. The second farmer creates permanent prosperity. I learned this lesson from my own father, who, despite his royal income, lived with the discipline of a man who had to account for every coin. He showed me his private chambers, where he kept separate containers for different purposes. The first and largest container was labeled Tomorrow's Kingdom, and into it went a portion of every tribute, every trade profit, every gift before any personal expense was considered. Only after this container was filled would he consider what remained for current needs. He explained to me that wealth is not about how much money passes through your hands, but how much you keep and multiply. He said that most people have money backwards. They see their income as money to spend and their savings as what is left over. But wealthy people see their income as money to invest and their spending as what is left over after they have paid their most important obligation, their future selves. The psychological shift required here cuts against everything society teaches us about money. We are told that we work hard to enjoy life now, that we deserve immediate gratification for our efforts, that saving for tomorrow means sacrificing today. But this thinking keeps people trapped in an endless cycle of working for money instead of money working for them. When I began paying myself first, something miraculous happened. My lifestyle did not collapse. Instead, it became more intentional. When you have less available for consumption, you become more careful about what deserves your money. You discover that most of your spending was mindless habit rather than conscious choice. You realize that many of your expenses added nothing to your actual happiness or well-being. More importantly, you begin to experience the profound psychological shift that comes from watching your invested money compound. Each month, you see your future self becoming wealthier, more secure, more capable of weathering any storm. This creates a positive feedback loop where investing becomes addictive in the best possible way. You start looking for opportunities to pay yourself even more because you can literally see your freedom growing. The practical implementation is deceptively simple. Before you pay any bill, buy any luxury, or satisfy any want, you automatically transfer a predetermined percentage of your income to investment accounts. This is not a suggestion or a goal. It is a non-negotiable commitment to your future self. Treat this transfer as seriously as you would treat a mortgage payment or a tax obligation, because that is exactly what it is, an obligation to your future security and freedom. Start with whatever percentage you can sustain, but commit to increasing it annually. The goal is not perfection from the beginning. The goal is consistency that compounds over time. A small percentage invested consistently will create more wealth than a large percentage invested sporadically. The mathematics of compound interest rewards persistence over intensity. The luxury that you think you cannot afford to delay will become easily affordable when your investments begin generating income that covers the cost. But the investment that you cannot afford to delay will never become affordable if you keep spending first and investing later. Time is the most powerful ingredient in the wealth-building formula, and every month you delay is a month of compound growth you can never recover. I discovered that paying myself first was not about money at all. It was about identity. When you consistently invest before you spend, you train yourself to think like an owner rather than a consumer, like a creator of wealth rather than a spender of income. This shift in identity changes every financial decision you make because you begin to see money through the eyes of someone who is building something permanent rather than someone who is just trying to get by. The person who spends first will always feel poor no matter how much they earn because they have trained themselves to consume everything available. The person who invests first will always feel wealthy because they have trained themselves to create more than they consume. This is the difference between a life of financial anxiety and a life of financial confidence. When you commit to paying yourself first, you are making a declaration that your future matters as much as your present, that your security is as important as your comfort, that your freedom is worth more than your immediate desires. This is not sacrifice. This is wisdom. This is how the wealthy think, and why they stay wealthy while others remain trapped in the cycle of earning and spending that leads nowhere but exhaustion. Number 4. Never concentrate all resources in a single bet. Deep in your heart, you know the feeling, the complete certainty that this one investment, this one opportunity, this one sure thing is going to change everything. You can see it so clearly, putting everything you have into this single bet that cannot possibly fail. The logic seems unbreakable, the research overwhelming, the potential rewards life-changing. But there is something else you know and try to ignore. The cold terror that keeps you awake at night, whispering what happens if you are wrong. This is the seductive whisper of concentration, and it has destroyed more fortunes than any enemy army ever could. It is the voice that convinces intelligent people to make the most unintelligent decision possible, betting their entire future on their ability to predict outcomes in an inherently unpredictable world. The desperate believe that concentration is how fortunes are made. The wise know that concentration is how fortunes are lost. Here is the truth that separates those who build lasting wealth from those who experience temporary windfalls. The goal is not to hit one massive home run that makes you rich forever. The goal is to stay in the game long enough for multiple smaller wins to compound into genuine wealth. The person who swings for the fences every time eventually strikes out permanently. The person who consistently gets on base eventually circles to home. Think of a mighty oak tree that has stood for centuries. Its strength comes not from one massive root that burrows deep in a single direction, but from thousands of smaller roots that spread in every direction, drawing sustenance from many sources, anchored against storms from multiple angles. When drought comes to one area, other roots find water. When disease attacks one root system, others remain healthy. The tree survives not through the power of concentration, but through the wisdom of diversification. I once knew a merchant who had built a prosperous trading business over decades of careful work. He dealt in many goods, served many markets, maintained relationships with many suppliers. His wealth grew steadily, predictably, safely. Then news came of a distant land where a single spice was selling for 100 times its normal price. The opportunity seemed impossible to ignore. Against all his previous wisdom, he sold everything, borrowed against everything else, and sent his entire fortune on ships carrying nothing but this one precious spice. The ships never arrived. Pirates, storms, political upheaval, we never learned what happened. But in a single moment of concentrated risk, he lost not just his fortune, but his ability to earn it back. He had destroyed the diversified foundation that had created his wealth in pursuit of the concentrated gamble that destroyed it. When I saw him years later, he was working for other merchants, his hair white with the stress of starting over with nothing in his later years. The shift in thinking that protects wealth is this: uncertainty is not something to bet against, it is something to prepare for. You cannot predict the future, but you can build a financial structure that thrives regardless of which future actually unfolds. This requires spreading your resources across different types of investments, different time horizons, different currencies, different geographical regions, different economic scenarios. Diversification is not about lack of conviction. It is about acknowledging the limits of your knowledge in a complex world. The most confident investor is often the most dangerous investor, because confidence without omniscience is just another word for recklessness. True wisdom lies in being absolutely certain about your uncertainty and positioning yourself accordingly. I learned to maintain what I called tactical liquidity, resources that could be deployed quickly when others were forced to sell at precisely the wrong time. While others were fully invested and unable to act when opportunity knocked, I always kept reserves available. This liquid capital earned lower returns during good times, but it enabled me to acquire extraordinary assets during bad times when desperate sellers emerged everywhere. The mathematics of diversification work in your favor in ways that are not immediately obvious. When you concentrate your resources, you need to be right about timing, specific outcomes, and multiple variables simultaneously. When you diversify, you only need to be right about the general direction of human progress and economic growth over time. The first requires perfect prediction. The second requires only reasonable patience. Concentration should occur only when you have genuine informational advantages that others lack, when you have insider knowledge that is both legal and actionable, when you have capabilities or insights that create asymmetric opportunities. For most people, most of the time, this level of advantage simply does not exist. What feels like special knowledge is usually widely available information that you happen to be encountering for the first time. The practical wisdom is to build a financial fortress with multiple defensive walls rather than putting all your strength into a single impenetrable door. Spread your investments across stocks, bonds, real estate, commodities, and other asset classes. Spread your time horizons across short-term liquidity, medium-term growth, and long-term wealth building. Spread your geographical exposure across domestic and international opportunities. Accept that diversification will sometimes make you feel foolish. When one of your investments soars while others lag, you will wish you had concentrated everything in the winner. But remember that you are optimizing for the unknown future, not the known past. You cannot predict which investment will be the star performer, but you can ensure that you participate in whatever turns out to be the winning sectors. The most successful people I have known were comfortable being bored by their investment strategy. They understood that exciting investments are usually dangerous investments, and boring investments are usually profitable investments. They preferred the steady compound growth of a diversified portfolio to the emotional roller coaster of concentrated bets. When you spread your risk across multiple baskets, you are not being pessimistic about any single opportunity. You are being realistic about your ability to predict outcomes in an uncertain world. You are choosing to sleep peacefully rather than lie awake, wondering if your entire future depends on factors beyond your control. You are building wealth that can survive any single catastrophe and continue growing regardless of which unexpected events unfold in the years ahead. Number 5. Never use debt for consumption. The credit card in your wallet whispers promises to you every day. It tells you that you can have what you want now and worry about payment later. It convinces you that the monthly payment is manageable, that you deserve these things, that waiting is for people who lack vision and ambition. But late at night, when you add up all those manageable payments, you discover a terrifying truth. You have borrowed against your future freedom to pay for present desires that added nothing to your long-term prosperity. This is the modern financial slavery that entraps more people than any physical chains ever could. Debt for consumption transforms you from a wealth builder into a wealth transferor. Every month, you take money that could have grown into your security and send it to others as interest payments. You work not for your own future, but to pay for your own past mistakes. You become a servant to your former impulses. The principle that can liberate you from this trap is both simple and revolutionary. Debt is acceptable only when it enables you to acquire an asset that generates more cash flow than the debt costs to service. Every other use of debt is a wealth-destroying decision disguised as a wealth-enabling tool. When you borrow to buy things that depreciate or consume your money rather than generate it, you are not leveraging your way to prosperity. You are leveraging your way to permanent financial struggle. Consider two men with identical incomes and identical desires for a better lifestyle. The first man uses credit to buy furniture, electronics, vacations, and restaurant meals that he cannot afford with his current income. His monthly debt payments consume an ever-growing portion of his earnings, leaving him with less money each month, despite earning the same amount. The second man delays these purchases while using any available credit to acquire rental properties that generate monthly income exceeding the debt payments. Over time, the first man becomes poorer, while the second man becomes wealthier, yet they started from exactly the same place. I learned this lesson by observing the merchants and nobles who came to me for wisdom about their financial troubles. Without exception, those who were struggling had used debt to fund lifestyles rather than investments. They had borrowed to buy larger homes they could not afford, finer clothes that generated no income, more elaborate entertainments that created only temporary pleasure. Their debt payments had become a prison that prevented them from ever building real wealth. But I also observed merchants who used debt strategically to acquire ships that generated trading profits, workshops that produced valuable goods, and land that provided rental income and appreciated in value. Their debt payments were covered by the assets they had purchased, and over time, both the assets and their personal wealth grew together. The difference was not in the amount of debt they used, but in what they used that debt to acquire. The psychological trap of consumer debt lies in how it reverses the natural relationship between earning and spending. Instead of spending the money you have earned, you spend money you hope to earn in the future. This forces you to work not just for your current needs, but to pay for past consumption while also trying to save for future security. The burden becomes overwhelming because you are trying to support 3 time periods simultaneously with the income from only one. When you eliminate consumer debt from your life, something profound happens to your relationship with money. Suddenly, every dollar you earn belongs to you rather than to credit card companies and banks. Your monthly expenses decrease dramatically, creating space for saving and investing that never existed before. Most importantly, your financial decisions become based on what you can actually afford rather than what creditors are willing to lend you. The practical application requires both discipline and strategic thinking. First, commit to never again borrowing money to purchase anything that does not generate income exceeding the cost of the debt. This means no credit card purchases that you cannot pay off immediately, no loans for vacations or luxury items, no financing for depreciating assets like cars unless absolutely necessary for income production. Second, if you currently carry consumer debt, prioritize eliminating it with the same urgency you would apply to escaping from a burning building. The interest you are paying on consumer debt is guaranteed loss that compounds against you every month. No investment opportunity can reliably generate returns high enough to justify carrying high-interest consumer debt while trying to build wealth simultaneously. The only acceptable uses of debt are for assets that meet 3 criteria. They generate predictable cash flow that exceeds the debt service. They provide collateral that protects the lender and limits your risk. And they carry interest rates lower than the expected return of the asset. Real estate that generates rental income often meets these criteria. Businesses that produce cash flow sometimes qualify. Consumer goods almost never do. I discovered that the wealthy use debt as a tool for acquiring assets, while the poor use debt as a tool for acquiring liabilities. The wealthy borrow against appreciating assets to buy more appreciating assets, creating a cycle where debt actually increases their net worth over time. The poor borrow against their future income to buy depreciating goods, creating a cycle where debt decreases their net worth every month. When you restrict debt to productive purposes only, you gain access to one of the most powerful wealth-building tools available, leveraged asset acquisition. But when you use debt for consumption, You transform this tool into a weapon that destroys your financial future. The choice between these two approaches determines whether debt becomes the accelerator of your wealth or the anchor that prevents you from ever achieving financial freedom. Remember that every payment you make to service consumer debt is money that cannot compound in your favor over decades. Every dollar paid in interest on credit cards or personal loans is a dollar that will never grow into multiple dollars through investment returns. Consumer debt does not just cost you money. It costs you time, freedom, and the compounding power that could have created your financial independence. Number 6. Never invest in what you don't understand or to please others. You see it in your social media feed, hear it at dinner parties, notice it in casual conversations. Everyone seems to be making money in markets you know nothing about. Cryptocurrency, tech stocks, foreign exchanges, complex financial instruments with names you can barely pronounce. The fear of missing out gnaws at you. The shame of admitting ignorance in front of friends who speak confidently about investments you do not understand. So you do what millions of others do. You invest money in things you cannot explain to appease people whose opinions should not matter to your financial future. This is how intelligent people make unintelligent decisions. They confuse social pressure with financial wisdom, popularity with profitability, trends with truth. They risk their hard-earned money not because they see genuine opportunity, but because they cannot bear to seem left behind by others who claim to see what they cannot. They invest their future in their present insecurity. The foundation of all successful investing is this uncomfortable truth. If you cannot explain an investment in simple terms to someone who knows nothing about it, then you do not understand it well enough to risk your money on it. Complexity is not a sign of sophistication in investing. It is usually a sign of either deception or confusion, and neither should inspire confidence in your financial decisions. Think of investment opportunities as potential business partners. You would never enter into partnership with someone whose business model you could not understand, whose character you had not investigated, whose track record you had not verified. Yet people routinely invest in companies, funds, and financial products based on nothing more than marketing materials and social proof from others who understand them just as little. A wealthy trader once approached me with an opportunity to invest in what he called revolutionary financial instruments that used mathematical models beyond the comprehension of ordinary people. He showed me charts and graphs, formulas and projections, testimonials from others who had already invested. But when I asked him to explain in simple terms what these instruments actually were and how they generated returns, he could only repeat the same complex jargon that explained nothing. I declined his opportunity, and he mocked me for my lack of sophistication. Within 2 years, his revolutionary instruments had collapsed, taking the savings of everyone who had invested with him. The mathematical models had been based on assumptions that proved false. The complexity had been designed to hide fundamental weaknesses rather than create genuine value. Those who had demanded simple explanations had protected their wealth, while those who had been impressed by complexity had lost everything. The shift in perspective that protects your wealth is this: investment sophistication is measured not by the complexity of what you buy, but by the clarity with which you understand what you buy. The most successful investors often have the most boring portfolios, because they focus on businesses and assets they can analyze with confidence, rather than instruments designed to impress others with their complexity. Social proof is the enemy of independent thinking in financial decisions. When everyone is buying something, that is usually the worst time for you to buy it. When everyone is avoiding something, that may be the best time for you to investigate it. Markets reward those who think differently from the crowd, not those who follow the crowd. Your financial future depends on your ability to ignore what others think you should do and focus on what the evidence tells you is actually wise. The practical application requires both intellectual humility and social courage. Before investing in anything, demand that someone explain it to you as if you were teaching it to a child. If they cannot do this, or if they become defensive about your questions, or if they pressure you to decide quickly before you have time to understand, these are warning signs that should send you in the opposite direction immediately. Research every investment independently, using sources that have no financial interest in your decision. Read the actual contracts and prospectuses, not just the marketing summaries. Understand the worst-case scenarios, not just the best-case projections. Know how you will exit the investment if things go wrong, and make sure that exit is under your control rather than dependent on the cooperation of others. Most importantly, invest only in businesses and assets that you genuinely find interesting and understandable. When you understand what you own, you can make informed decisions about when to buy more, when to hold steady, and when to sell. When you own things you do not understand, you are at the mercy of others' opinions and market emotions that may have nothing to do with actual value. I learned that the most profitable investments are often the most boring ones. Businesses that provide necessary goods and services, assets that generate predictable income, industries that you interact with and understand as a consumer. These investments may not generate exciting stories to share at social gatherings, but they generate the steady returns that compound into genuine wealth over time. The approval of others is worthless. If it costs you money, you cannot afford to lose. The disapproval of others is worthless. If it protects money, you cannot afford to risk. Your financial decisions should be based on your understanding and your goals, not on your desire to fit in with people who may be making the same mistakes you are tempted to make. When someone pressures you to invest in something you do not understand, they are asking you to trust their judgment with your money. But if they cannot explain their reasoning in terms you can understand, then they are asking you to trust something they do not understand either. This is not investment. This is gambling with extra steps and social pressure attached. Remember that every dollar you lose chasing investments you do not understand is a dollar that cannot be invested in opportunities you do understand. Every moment you spend trying to decode complex financial instruments is time you cannot spend analyzing simple businesses that generate predictable profits. Focus your energy on becoming excellent at understanding and profiting from simple things, rather than becoming mediocre at understanding complex things that may be designed to separate you from your money. Number 7. Never treat money as an end, but as a mission. You lie awake at night sometimes, staring at the ceiling, wondering what the point of it all is. You work to earn money, to buy things to impress people, who are working to earn money, to buy things to impress other people, in an endless cycle that leads nowhere meaningful. The bank account grows, the possessions accumulate, yet you feel emptier rather than fuller. You begin to suspect that you have been climbing a ladder, leaned against the wrong wall, achieving a kind of success that does not actually succeed at anything that matters. This is the spiritual crisis that eventually comes to everyone who treats money as the destination rather than the vehicle. When accumulation becomes the purpose, you become a servant to your own wealth rather than its master. You lose sight of why you wanted money in the first place and begin to serve the money instead of making the money serve you. You become rich in resources but poor in purpose, wealthy in assets but bankrupt in meaning. The transformation that changes everything is this: money is not the point. Money is the tool that enables the point. It is not the destination. It is the means of transportation to destinations that actually matter: security for your family, impact on your community, legacy for future generations. The ability to solve problems and create value that extends far beyond your own immediate needs and desires. When you understand money as a mission rather than a prize, every financial decision becomes filtered through a larger purpose. You ask not just whether something will make you richer, but whether it will make you more capable of fulfilling your deeper responsibilities and aspirations. You build wealth not for the sake of having wealth, but for the sake of deploying wealth in service of something greater than yourself. Picture a general preparing for battle. He accumulates weapons not because he loves weapons, but because weapons enable him to protect his people and secure their future. He builds fortifications not because he enjoys construction, but because fortifications provide safety for those depending on him. He trains his army not because he loves drilling, but because preparation prevents tragedy. The weapons, fortifications, and training are means to an end, not ends in themselves. I learned this perspective from observing the difference between those who built lasting dynasties and those who built temporary fortunes. The fortune builders focused on accumulation for its own sake. They measured success by the size of their treasuries and the luxury of their possessions. But when challenges came, their wealth could not sustain them because it had no deeper purpose driving its growth and deployment. The dynasty builders, however, understood wealth as a tool for building something larger than themselves. They created systems that would protect and provide for their families across generations. They built businesses that would employ people and serve communities long after they were gone. They established institutions that would continue their values and extend their positive impact through time. Their wealth had meaning beyond itself, which gave it power beyond mere accumulation. The practical implementation of this philosophy begins with defining your mission clearly. What problems do you want your money to solve? What lives do you want your wealth to improve? What legacy do you want your resources to create? When you have clear answers to these questions, financial decisions become much simpler because you have criteria beyond mere profit for evaluating opportunities. Emergency reserves become not just financial cushions, but tools for maintaining your independence and your ability to help others when crises arise. Insurance becomes not just protection for your assets, but protection for your family's security and your mission's continuity. Investment returns become not just numbers in an account, but fuel for achieving purposes that matter beyond your own comfort. Legal structures for protecting and transferring wealth become not just tax optimization strategies, but mechanisms for ensuring that your values and resources continue working for good after you are no longer able to direct them personally. Estate planning becomes not just inheritance preparation, but mission continuation planning that extends your positive impact through generations. Generosity becomes not just charitable giving, but strategic deployment of resources to multiply your positive impact beyond what you could achieve through personal effort alone. But this generosity must be thoughtful and criteria-driven, focused on creating lasting value rather than temporary relief, on building capacity in others rather than creating dependency. I discovered that when you maintain living expenses below the passive income generated by your assets, you create something remarkable: permanent financial independence that enables permanent mission focus. You no longer work for money, you work for purpose, and money works for you in service of that purpose. This creates a positive spiral where your mission gives meaning to your wealth, and your wealth gives power to your mission. The greatest tragedy in financial life is not poverty. It is purposeless prosperity. It is having enough money to do anything but no compelling reason to do anything in particular. It is achieving financial independence but remaining spiritually and socially dependent on the opinions and expectations of others. It is building a fortune that outlasts your body, but not a mission that outlasts your lifetime. When you align your wealth with your values, something profound happens. Money stops being a source of anxiety and starts being a source of confidence. Financial decisions stop being emotionally charged and start being logically clear. Wealth building stops being a selfish act and starts being a generous one, because you know that every dollar you accumulate wisely today becomes a dollar available for meaningful deployment tomorrow. Remember that money is one of the most powerful tools ever created for turning vision into reality, intentions into impact, dreams into achievement. But like any powerful tool, its value depends entirely on the skill and wisdom of the person who wields it. Treat money as a mission, and it becomes a force for good that extends far beyond your own life and touches generations you will never meet. There is a moment in every person's life when they stand at the edge of two worlds. Behind them lies the familiar territory of financial mediocrity, where most people spend their entire lives running in circles, chasing mirages, building castles of sand that the first storm washes away. Ahead lies the unknown country of genuine wealth, where money serves purpose rather than ego, where decisions are made from wisdom rather than fear, where every choice compounds into something greater than its individual parts. You are standing at that edge right now. These 7 principles are not just financial strategies. They are the bridge between who you have been and who you are capable of becoming. They are the difference between a life spent serving money and a life where money serves your deepest mission. They separate those who accumulate temporary riches from those who build eternal legacies. Picture a master architect who refuses to build on weak foundations, no matter how beautiful the proposed structure. He knows that without solid ground beneath, the most magnificent building will eventually crumble. Your financial life is that building. These principles are your foundation. Every compromise you make, every shortcut you take, every principle you abandon for immediate gain weakens the very ground on which your future depends. The wealthy understand something that the desperate never learn. True power comes not from what you are willing to do for money, but from what you are unwilling to do, regardless of how much money is offered. Your character becomes your currency. Your principles become your profit. Your patience becomes your power. If you are ready to continue this transformation, to keep building on the foundation we have established together, subscribe now and become part of a community that chooses wisdom over shortcuts, substance over spectacle, eternal principles over temporary profits. The path of Solomon is not for everyone, but it may be exactly what you have been searching for your entire life.